Liverpool have made their bid for 130 million euro. Apparently it's 100 mil plus some add-ons, which basically says, look, if you really back your guy, then, you'll back yourselves in the transfer market. And that kind of works. But I wanted to address why Liverpool are willing to break this idea, or whether they even are breaking this idea of spending a lot of money when they don't spend a lot of money. Is this just a silly Liverpool or FSG trope that down the years has kind of come to be associated with the club because people haven't really told the proper stories? And when you look down Liverpool's, and this is genuinely it, Liverpool's 10 most expensive transfer fees paid, you start to get a better look at what Liverpool are actually doing and why they will break their transfer fee structure, that £30 million, £35 million area, in order to sign a big player like Florian Wirtz, a generational player like Florian Wirtz. I think that's worth taking a look at, right? First of all, who's the most expensive player ever to sign for Liverpool? That's right, Darwin Núñez, 85 million. I think, first of all, off the bat, the precedent here is when Liverpool think that there is a game-breaking or game-defining player, or someone that you can't get from anywhere else in the market, they'll spend the money. And I think very rarely do you find that Liverpool are wrong about whether that player is a game-changing player. It's whether the culture has fit. And really, the reason I would say Darwin Núñez hasn't succeeded at Liverpool isn't to do with Liverpool. I think it's to do with Klopp leaving. And I think Klopp was invested in Núñez. They probably got to look under the hood and realise that there's a bit more work to be done than maybe they initially thought. But I think that if you'd have had Klopp still at the club, I think you probably would have seen a more prolific season from someone like Darwin, and you probably would have seen a very different player. Liverpool are going to try and get value in the market. If they can get that value from Saudi, I will absolutely take that value. I think the player probably would too. We'll move on from there. Virgil van Dijk, a game-breaking player, a generational talent, and someone that Liverpool knew was worth the money. He won us Champions League, he won us 2 Premier Leagues, and he's won us much more in between that as well. Virgil van Dijk is one of the greatest Premier League signings of all time, and he is the greatest centre-back of all time, probably in the world, but in the Premier League, certainly. We know what he offers, we know what he does. Dominik Szoboszlai. I think Szoboszlai will have been very much on that transfer list from the previous geek guys, but Klopp will have loved this idea of that 8, the transitional 8 that Szoboszlai was. I think he's become even more in a nuanced way, intricate and important to Liverpool because of his energy, because of his ability, because he does have a gravity, because he can shoot, because he is great at finding those little round-the-corner passes, but also because he's got the motor and the engine on him that when he drops to the 6 next season will make him even more valuable to us. Again, there isn't an experiment here. Dominik Szoboszlai just is a good player, and you see the difference when he's not in the Liverpool team. Alisson Becker, 62.5 million. Game-changing, generational. I don't need to tell you more about Becker. He's been as good as a striker for us. And this is where the list gets interesting. Naby Keita, 60 million. 60 million for Naby Keita. I've argued in the past that because of the transfer fee, that's made him a failure. And I think, we've spoken about how he's almost had almost equivalent minutes to someone like Oxlade-Chamberlain. I think he's had as much of an impact as him. I think he probably had a more prolific impact. Naby Keita would have been a game changer for us if he hadn't been injured. And I know if buts and maybes are very easy to throw around in football, but it's a very different prospect, I think, to what we would have seen if we'd have seen a more fit Naby Keita. And ultimately at Liverpool, fitness and availability is very important. In the games he did play in, I think we got those glimpses, those moments, and the Naby Nation got what it was that they wanted in the proof. That he was game-changing for us, especially in the position that Klopp deployed him in. But he didn't play enough, and he wasn't available enough. And I think that became a bit of a point of frustration for Liverpool and for him. And now he's gone on elsewhere. I think, we've seen dips, we've seen tumultuous relationships, interesting moments for him. But I think what we've seen is, how can I justify that? I think what we know is Liverpool would have been a better side with him. The Fekir signing would also have, I think, kicked us onto another level. I think we're always looking for that guy to kind of play in that, it is a progressive 8, if not a 10. And I think that's what we were looking for at that time. Luis Diaz. Luis Diaz will be framed as a failure if he leaves Liverpool, or kind of an unfulfilled experiment. But I think 54 million was probably about fair for him at the time. If we bring in Wirtz for double the transfer fee, and he doesn't up that output, I think Luis Diaz is probably a very good yardstick to judge any player or signing by. We've won things in the time that Lewis has been here. But I also think there have been times where we've needed to step up. I think Liverpool are looking for that consistency and to consolidate the squad and for those to step up. The name I'm seeing next on the transfer list is Christian Benteke, and I will almost 100% attribute that down to a manager that kind of came before this golden era although it was a good era under Brendan Rodgers. He wanted him. They had to give him to him. He got him. It was 46.5 million. That's a high amount of money for him. But again, it kind of speaks to the Wirtz transfer. Wirtz is not a Benteke. He's not a Luis Diaz. I wouldn't even put him in the Naby Keita category. I put him in that very top category. I know we haven't seen him play for Liverpool. This guy is a two-time Bundesliga player of the season, only having won it once in those 2 seasons. And he's got the reliability of these other 3, Fabinho, Jota, and McAllister, all in a similar band, kind of 40 to 45 million. Changed fundamentally the way that midfield operates. Each adds some steel into either the front line or that midfield. Jota, by the way, does change that midfield because of the way he drops deep. But I think what this list proves is that Liverpool, first of all, haven't maybe spent as much as some of us think in the transfer market, though we've still spent an astronomical amount. I think we're like the 8th highest spending in that time, which only puts us a bit ahead of Brentford, but massively behind some of the bigger clubs. I think what we've done is, again, we've always been about consolidating. We've always been about doubling down on brilliant transfers rather than spending broadly and then kind of, having to work out and pick the wheat from the chaff, if you like. So that's why Wirtz fits in here into this transfer spend. He is not, he's not a Mane where he comes in for very reasonable value, though I've got to admit, I think 100 million for a generational player who is described as the German meets the Brazilian kind of works. I think he's game-changing for Slot. I think he's very much giving us and Slot a reward. But I also think what we're seeing is someone who Liverpool see as the A-side number 10 in this team, and someone who will unlock more from Szoboszlai, more from that striker, more from Salah, more from the left winger, or the possibility to go out there. And he offers what the manager wants, which is adaptability. We've seen Wirtz being able to attack from the right, the left, and the centre. We've seen him being able to play in that false 9 type position, which I'm not saying he will start in consistently, but I think he's able to inhabit when needed and during a tactical evolution during the game. And I also think we've seen someone who offers something defensively and on the counter. He's an all-rounder who is still growing into that all-rounder role, who's about to enter some of those peak years for the wingers and who's able to utilize his best skills at this time. We're not, it is a project that we can finish, but it's very much a project that you look at and say, I can't wait to add the final few touches onto that. And I think Liverpool see that. And they've been putting in the groundwork for this for a very long time. There'll be another video about that groundwork later. But I think what I'm really talking about here is the willingness from Liverpool to spend money when it makes financial sense. And when the charts show this money is well spent. Liverpool aren't going to spend money on players that they don't feel are kind of in that, how can I put it, like that well spent area, right? And that's why we shop sometimes in the 30 to 50 million pound player aisle. That's not bad money. We're not shopping for bargains. We're shopping for value. We're shopping for fit. And last summer, I think you saw, they went for Zubimendi for big money, but they weren't willing to go to another option down the list because they didn't see that value there. And that's kind of the point here. You can't just say like, hey, we just got to shop and get someone. That's kind of the football manager / FIFA / fan idea of shopping. What we're really looking at here is, can we actually find value? Can we actually get 100% of that value rather than 50% of that value out of these players? And in this time, are we going to see that value fulfilled? Because if we're shopping in an aisle where Manchester United have got themselves into, Chelsea sort of had themselves in that place for a little while where it was like, oh, are we getting value here? Or are we getting an asset we can sell on? That is not where Liverpool want to be. We're now in a different phase to where we were before. And I think you can see that in the signings of Frimpong, Kerkez, and in Wirtz. All 3 of those guys represent immense value for the club, but also a statement of intent, stealing a hop. They show the workings, the inner workings of what is going on now at Liverpool. And it is not just, let's run some numbers and then buy the best guy at the top of those numbers. It's, let's go build some relationships. Again, another video on that later. And I'm kind of here for it, to be honest. It's not about, are we going to outspend someone else this summer? Are we the highest spending team in this league? I don't think we'll be one of the highest spending teams in this off season because of the money we've had available. But I think ultimately net spend, if you want to talk about that, is going to be a big part of this for us because we will be moving on a lot of players. And I think it doesn't feel like such a risk because we've had that season to assess those guys and almost to have the familiarity with them to be able to say, right, you really don't fit this system. Let's get a player that we are way more sure fits this and is a round peg in a round hole rather than an oval in a round hole. I hope you understand what I mean by that. Wirtz fits all of those elements and he enhances each of those elements for the players around him. It is that simple. And I think what Liverpool are about to pull off is very special. It's not about did we beat Real Madrid there or Man City, whoever. It's about where does this player really want to be? And I think very often, especially because we're assuming things and because we have already established narratives for each of these players and each transfer, we kind of miss out on the fact that Liverpool have done some good groundwork which is different to what other clubs are doing. And when we analyse Liverpool, we analyse clubs by the transfer narratives and ideas that we've seen at City or United or Chelsea or these things. And actually, the reason Edwards is such a unique thinker, the reason Richard Hughes was at the top of our list of people to bring in, was because they do things differently, was because they make people feel different and they operate in a way which other people aren't seeing that space in the market. That means that our analysis will not always be spot on. I appreciate you guys watching this video. I've got a tactical analysis of Hugo Ekitike later today. And I appreciate you guys checking in. I will look in on this channel again later, but in the meantime, there's Discord, there's Patreon, and there is also a Super Chat. If you feel inclined to do so on any of those three, go hit it, and I'll see you guys in a little while. Much love.